Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name's StepsBasic, and welcome back to my community show. Yeah. Anyway, so first of all, before we get into the topic, of course, announcements. And with this last week, I definitely owe you all a bit of an apology. It has been a pain in the butt. This week has just been nasty. Sorry for the very limited upload. I didn't even get every day. I mean, yesterday I was just like, I don't have the energy to do anything because of how bad this week has been. Okay, so first of all, the interesting new connection issue where I try to record at night like I usually do, and my internet's like, nah, I don't want to do it. It's cool. So it's like, thanks. I'm trying to play a pretty interesting game right now, and you're ruining that experience for me. Thank you very much. Anyway, but then on Tuesday, we had the AC and heater people come in. We had to replace the entire system, which is 10 years of debt, an additional 10 years of debt. But on the plus side, it's not exactly a huge payment a month. I mean, it's still a lot, but it's not like $300-$400. It's just $150, which still a lot, but better than it could have been. But anyway, beyond that, we had to have the electrical guy come in because the person who put the heater in last time wired it into the light system in a very bad way that we couldn't use our hallway light when the heater was running, or it would blow the machine. I literally lost 2 motherboards on my last heater because of that. And so we got that squared away. And now I can use my hallway light again, but I mean, I'm probably still not ever going to use it because, well, 10 years in the same house, and I haven't really used the hallway light at all because of how it's been going. So it's like, now, what's the point? So much stress, more money going goodbye, but at least now I don't have to worry about my heater and my air conditioner for a while, and it actually could save me money in the long run, like with heating and cooling the house. So woo. But apart from all that, we're moving right along in Last of Us, and I have some new ideas for fun series that I want to do, and I have another basic steps in the planning, which is going to be coming up this week, hopefully. Again, sorry if I don't get to it, but I'm going to try. But anyway, apart from all that, that's going to be it for the announcements. So let's move into today's topic, which I've always found to be a fascinating idea of superhero powers and what they do to the human body. Now, we often think about, like, oh, if Superman's going to catch a plane, he's just going to tear right through it. Or if he tries to catch that girder, whatever's below him is going to break, too, because it's going to be like, wait, and it's like, yeah. So that's the applications of what the superhero's powers are going to affect the world around them, but we never really think too much about how it's going to affect the body itself. Now, I actually have this in my story, in my magnum opus story, the one that, well, eventually, if I ever do get it published, it'll be great. But, it's kind of an interesting thing. And, superpowers come in a variety of, flavors is a good way to put it. And there are so many different powers out there, in the idea, in the world, that was like, oh, yeah, okay, cool, super strength, super speed, telepathy, etc. And I was thinking about things like healing and super density, like indestructibility, as it were, and how that sort of thing kind of affects it. And of course, my favorite superpowers are mostly transportation based, but also I do absolutely love the healing factor idea and invisibility. These are all very interesting ones, like things that make life a little bit more convenient, and the healing factor, especially as you get older, you start to wear down, and it's one that becomes more and more appealing every year. It's like, oh yeah, that'll be great. I don't have to worry about back pain today. I don't have to worry about flossing and hurting my back, and like, oh, why can't I do this anymore? And aging goes out the window. If you look at like Wolverine and Deadpool and whatnot, they don't age because their cells are constantly restoring themselves and whatnot. And then of course there's invisibility. It's like, I just don't want to be seen right now. Just leave me alone. I just want to go from here to there. But of course there are some issues with that, and of course bad applications of that depending on the person who's using it. But like my favorite, I'd say, is teleportation. The idea of just going somewhere with a thought, not having to get in the car and drive down the street and whatnot. And of course, this form takes various different paths. Like, oh, can I just teleport myself, or do I create portals and that sort of thing? And I love that idea. That's kind of why I like that, because I like, more than teleporting myself, I like the idea of creating portals to be able to go through into wherever I want. Like, I create a portal here, and then it opens up in Egypt on top of the pyramid, as an example. And it'd be great, just and then poof. Ah, Egypt. Nice. Of course, that also opens up real world applications too, and effects too. Like, if I open up a portal to the moon, is it gonna suck all the oxygen out of my area and just thoop? Ah. But anyway, let's start to think about more like real world applications, more like how these would affect our bodies and whatnot. And there are some powers that automatically come with an automatic insert. Your body is super dense. So you're indestructible or nigh indestructible. It makes you really strong. At the same time. So like the Hulk or Superman. They have the superpower, super strength, and resistant to stuff. And honestly, super strength would have to come with the nigh invulnerability, close to being indestructible, because of the simple fact that if you're strong enough to lift a car, your body needs to be strong enough to hold that up. So it's like, oh yeah, I lift up the car, then oh, my ankles, those are my wrists, but those broke too. You can't see them, but they're below the camera. And then, oh, there's my back. You lifted up a car. Yay, good for you. But then it squished you. Bummer. So naturally, super strength has to come with some level of invulnerability on account of the fact that if you lift something, you have to be able to support it. And then there are certain ones that just don't have a practical use in the real world. Like somebody who can move fast, right? Now, say they move faster than sound, they won't be able to hear anything. So they'll be running deaf. And of course, additionally, if they run faster than sound, or sorry, if they run faster than sound, they won't be able to hear anything. But if they also run faster than light, which, impractical and also probably impossible, but if they run faster than light, they won't be able to see anything. So it would be like a flea who can move. I don't think it's a flea, actually, but there is an insect who literally cannot see where they're going when they move because they move too fast. And of course, so at the same time as developing super speed, you need to develop super reflexes at the same time. I mean, granted, yeah, you can move fast and whatnot, but at the same time, it has to come with some sort of a spider sense, if you will. A sort of thing where you know ahead of time what's going to happen. So it's like, if I'm running down the street at breakneck speed, let's limit it to like 65 miles per hour. Something we human people can do in a car. We can't run that fast, of course, because, well, again, going back to the whole invulnerability thing. But we can drive a car at 65 miles per hour, and we can adjust and stuff. And my mom used to have a joke that at certain speeds, driving stops being driving and starts being aiming. So it's like you're not really driving anymore. You're just crossing your fingers and hoping you make it. And race car drivers obviously exceed speeds of over 100 miles an hour driving out on their tracks, but they're like, it's a one-way track. You don't have anything like unpredictable happening, with the exception, of course, when you factor in the other drivers who may, shift in front of you all of a sudden, and it's like, oh, if I'm going this fast, he's only going that fast, then yay. uh, but of course, at the same time, a lot of these are going to have to include another level of superpower. Like, if you think about the Flash can super speed, right? And his body, because of the speed force and whatnot, has heightened healing factor. So he can run, and he also heals fast. But at the same time, he would kind of need to be able to heal fast, because if he doesn't, then the speed, of course, adding again to more of a super density to avoid this near invulnerability, he would travel at such a speed as the parts of his body may end up being ripped off. Whew, whew. You better not put your arm out. Oh, you broke your wrist. Your pinky goes out. All of a sudden, your pinky's on Main Street when you're all the way down in Mexico now. Well, I guess you didn't really need that. So you need another layer of invulnerability and more healing factor, because if you're going to be damaging yourself as you're running, you need to be able to heal. One thing that I really do like about the Flash, at least on the CW, I think they addressed it in the comics too, and I know they make a joke of it in the cartoons, but how much calories you burn with how fast you're moving, and your entire body is just in a constant state of, I need food. Of course, we can also take that back to the super strength and super density, because a person who is super dense will have a lot more effort in moving themselves. So even just walking really slowly will burn a lot more calories than you or I will in just taking a step. So arguably, everyone with any sort of super ability would probably have a super appetite as well. Which also begs the question of, or answers the question of why we don't see very many overweight superheroes. One question I've always wondered is how much flight would burn. How many calories flight would burn. Because that was one thing I was kind of considering in my stories, a character with the ability of flight. And I was like, that's interesting. Because you think about it, it's like, what are they using to lift themselves off the ground? Now, I think most of us have confirmed that Superman's flight comes from the ability, his super strength. So it's like he pushes himself up more than what we can do. So he uses his own strength to defy gravity. But there are other people like Storm who uses wind to lift herself up. Magneto uses, metal. He lifts up metal, on himself to lift himself into the air. And psychic characters, telekinetic people can actually use their brains to push the earth down and lift themselves up, because, forces and opposites and physics. But I've always wondered just how much. Now, of course, depending on how flight is achieved, it will burn less or more calories. Like Superman's strength, for instance, would probably burn more than Magneto's metal. So Superman would be a little bit more hungry than Magneto would be. That was an interesting one, because I actually have a character with the ability to manipulate metal. And it's like Magneto can tell when there's metal around, right? So it's like, how does he tell? Does he know? And it's like, okay, so he enters the field, he feels the magnetic pull of it because he's magnetic. But my character isn't magnetic. And as such, he can use his power on anything metallic, not just magnetized. And so he feels he can hear the vibrations of the molecules in the metal. He can feel and hear the metal. And I liken it to whispers and the metal talking to him in the story. But he like that's how he first hears it, is just in his ears. And so it kind of adds a layer of like, what is this mysterious whispering? And it gets more intense when his power starts using it, because he's moving it, he's manipulating the molecules of the metal, but he can only use it on metallic minerals, not like he can use it on iron and anything that's classified as metallic, which I thought was kind of weird. But then he met his counterpart who can't use metallic. He can't manipulate metallic, but he can manipulate like other minerals and whatnot. So that was kind of an interesting thing. And then there was a battle, and it was fun. But so that kind of like adds a layer of how does he do it? It's a psychic level, telekinetic. So he is tied to it on a mental level. So it's like, does he have metal in his brain? Is that how he does it? And it's like, I haven't really answered that yet. But now, teleportation. Going back to one of my favorites. The opening of the portal thing is easily answered. You open up a wormhole, as it were, through time and space that takes you directly to where you want to go. And of course, it has to be time and space, because if it's just space, you're going to end up launching yourself into outer space, because the Earth moves. And I had a fun conversation in my story about that. Like, one character has the ability to teleport, but only through shadows. She's a shadow walker. It's very interesting. I love it. But she had a conversation with a higher being, and the higher being, in a way, backhandedly insults her. It's like, I'm so impressed by how you can just use your ability to move without having to run through all the calculations in your mind about how and where you want to be. You just see it. And it's like, for me, I have to do all this math. It's so hard calculating the rotation of the Earth, where the Earth is going to be when I want to be there, how I'm going to teleport, where I'm going to teleport. All the math has to go through my brain. And you're so stupid. You do it just like that. And I'm like, that was kind of mean. But higher beings, they don't really understand our emotions and whatnot, so they didn't really see it as a bad thing. Thinking again about teleportation, and what we know about teleportation is the movement of one object to another area. But at the same time, it's like there's the whole idea of the breaking down, copying, and reprinting elsewhere sort of thing. So it's like Star Trek's teleporters are destroying the body and teleporting it to another, and printing it out in another location, right? That sort of idea. And what happens if something goes wrong? Like, oh, your arm is suddenly in the middle of your chest. Your cells, there's a printing error, as it were. And we see stuff like that happen in Star Trek as well. With the teleporter incidents, and people like supposed to be teleporting from the ship to the station. It's like,
Oh my God. Starfleet, do you have them?
Enterprise. What we got back didn't live long, fortunately.
Of course, that's going back a while, because nobody's really interested in that except on a fundamental basis. Like, oh, that's kind of neat. I wonder what that would happen. And I don't think they've actually ever addressed it in any recent Star Trek series. And of course, I say recent, like all the way back to TNG. I'm pretty sure the only time it was ever addressed was in the original series. Maybe not even. Maybe only in the original movie. But anyway. And the idea that teleporting is breaking your body down in one place and putting it in another is the idea I kind of functioned off of in my story. And technically, by the rules of my universe, my character, if she hadn't had followed the war, as it were, because it's the war of the false gods, if she hadn't have joined the war, then she would not have been able to do her power. Even though it was innately born into her, her body would not be able to sustain it, because even within the confines of the story, every time she teleports, until her body gets used to it, as she's learning, she tears her body apart. Even one point, she jumps the furthest she's ever jumped, and that is from Alaska to Russia. The closest the two could be, and she jumped between them. And she had to rest and let her body heal after that, because of the simple fact that she put so much strain just jumping across the channel. And of course, at the same time, the reason that she was able to do it is because joining the war automatically gives everyone with a superpower a healing factor. And that's explained in the rules of the story, and you have to read the story to find out about how that works. But essentially, that's what happens. And the thing about how much strain that puts, again, going to caloric intake and output, how much strain it would take to poof yourself over there. And the way I go into talking about even the healing factor is to show how much it affects the body. Like, we watch Wolverine on the X-Men shows, X-Men movies and whatnot, and he gets a gash in his forehead and just. But in order for it to be healing so fast, it would be burning a lot of energy. So much so that even in my story, I talk about how parts of their body will ignite because of the amount of energy going through in the output of healing and whatnot. So it's like he gets a gash on his forehead, flares up, and then heals. And that in its own right is burning more calories. So it's like healing, even a healing factor would require a lot of caloric intake. Human bodies just ain't built for this, bro. Which is actually another thing that led me in my stories to do things, right? Like, I have a Black Bolt character. He's not Black Bolt, but he has power of word. When he talks, it breaks things. And a normal human being, if they talk, everything from their voice box up would be destroyed if that were their power. Meaning that they would need reinforced parts all the way through here. So the voice box, the cords that go make sounds come out, would have to be reinforced so that when he says something, it's not going to immediately rupture and explode. So then, up through the throat, he'd need reinforcements in there too, so the voice will go up and out, not up and blow his mind. And then, of course, it's coming out, so we need our cheeks, right? And our teeth. We need a reinforcement there. And it was kind of funny because in that story, in that particular part of the story, the character, he's like, he wrote. He wrote all the time. That's how he talked to people. And my other character, who has the ability to shut off his pain receptors, which has other issues. If you can't tell you're in pain, then how can you tell when you're when you hurt something? But anyway, so the other character, he's like, hey, I want to test something. And the guy's like, and so the guy just balls up and pops him right in the face, just to test out how resilient that is. Now, this guy, the other guy, the puncher, he is not super strong, but he is, he's pretty strong. So, he's not like, a little child popping somebody in the mouth like, oh, that hurts. No, he's like Mr. Universe punching you square in the jaw. He's going to break something. And so he pops him really hard, like the hardest you can do. And my guy, he's like, he gets the rebound on the face, and it's like, nothing broken. Nice. Because he needs that, and his body needs to be built that way. Otherwise, he's going to explode his face every time he says something. Every time he uses his power. And his power isn't on the level of Black Bolt's. Like, he won't destroy the world with a scream. But he can level hills. Like, when he talks, it will break up the dirt in front of him. So arguably, if his power were to get stronger, he could theoretically destroy the world just by looking down and saying, "Hey, what's up?" And, but no, his power isn't that strong. Isn't strong enough to do that. It is fairly formidable and one of the more powerful powers I've had in my stories. But it's not like destroy the world type power. So now, telepathy. This will be my last one, I promise. Telepathy is one that I've always found kind of interesting. Like, our brains are like super processors, right? We're able to think faster and calculate things faster than most computers. Provided we have all the information and whatnot, we are able to put two and two together before we can type 2 plus 2 into a computer, and we can give you 4 before, a computer would be able to. So we'll be like, 2 plus 4. That's about how quick. So our brains are super processors. So the idea of talking to somebody's mind doesn't seem that far-fetched, being able to put thoughts into a person's brain. And the way that people talk, the way that the false gods in my story talk to people is literally by putting thoughts into their brain. And I've always thought that would be interesting, but at the same time, it's just like the idea of forcing an idea into somebody's brain. And I've kind of likened this to the joke about God in the Kevin Smith movie, not Clerks, but Dogma. The way God, when God talks to somebody of a human quality in Dogma, causes their head to explode. Now, of course, they still played it up far too much because, God's voice is supposed to be able to smite somebody with a word. And they yelled, and it's like, everyone cover your ears. It wouldn't work that way. You can't just cover your ears and defend against the voice of God. But anyway, I've always kind of likened it to that. Like, could you put enough thoughts into a person's brain to overheat their brain and whatnot? And I've always found that kind of an intriguing thing, even to the point where I made a character do something like that. Except I called it, breaking their mind. And, even to the point where there's an audible crack in the person's ears. And it's like they just, can do it with a thought, just like overload their brain with information and break it. But that would probably take a lot of information, and also would probably generate a lot of heat. So that's that's another interesting thing. Anyway, I've talked for a long time on this. Dang, this is like one of the longest videos I've ever made for this show. Anyway, but what are your favorite superhero powers? What ones would you like to have? And what sort of ideas do you think would apply? Like, how would that affect your body and whatnot? But apart from all that, that's going to be it for me for today. Thank you all so much for joining me for this episode of The Community Show. Hopefully you enjoyed it. And if you did, go poke that like button for me. If you'd like to see more from me, make sure to hit that subscribe button. And of course, as always, you are more than welcome to leave a comment in the comment section down below, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. When I can, if I can, all that jazz. And tune in next time for another topic at another time. And until then, good night.